Muhammad being prophesied in the Bible. What do you got to say about that?
The most popular one, which we can discuss, is Deuteronomy 18, which is the most popular one that we like to give, where we read about the prophet who was like unto Moses that was to come after him to the people of Israel. And we read in verse 15 and following of Deuteronomy 18, the Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from among your brothers. And so stop right there. They'll say, well, Ishmael, of course, was the brother of Isaac. And so that it makes sense that the brothers that's in mind here is the Ishmaelites. We know, of course, Muhammad, being an Arab, was an Ishmaelite, and so Jesus, being an Israelite, is ruled out here. It must refer to Muhammad. And the Lord said to me, they are right in what they have spoken. I will raise up for them a prophet like you from among their brothers, and I will put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak to them all that I command him. And so when it speaks about putting when God speaks about putting his words in this prophet's mouth, Muslims understand that to refer to the way that the angel Jibreel commanded Muhammad to recite. And unfortunately, if you look at all you need to do to refute this is to look at the context. The context is key. If you go back earlier in this chapter, to right at the start of the chapter, Deuteronomy 18, verse 1, we read Levitical priests. All the tribe of Levi shall have no person or inheritance with Israel. They shall eat the Lord's food offerings as their inheritance. They shall have no inheritance among their brothers. The Lord is their inheritance, so he promised them. So here, brothers is defined specifically as Israelites, not Ishmaelites. So that's the most popular one that they go to, and unfortunately, it's just ruled out by the context. All you need to do to refute this is to look at the context. The context is key. If you go back earlier in this chapter, to right at the start of the chapter, Deuteronomy 18, verse 1,
Green talks about the word brethren, but point number one is the word brethren is in the context when you know it's Israelite, it's in the context when you know it's talking about another one. But Deuteronomy 18 verse 15 onwards is ambiguous. It's ambiguous. You can interpret it as fellow Israelite, and you can interpret it as other. But I challenge Samuel Green to show how is Jesus a brethren of Moses. I'm sure you must have heard this argument. Jesus had no father, so he cannot trace his lineage to one of the 12 tribes. And to be a brethren of Moses, you have to trace your lineage to one of the 12 tribes. In fact, the Quran in Surah 61, ayah number 5 and ayah number 6 even makes this distinction. But you have to stick to the Bible. Numbers chapter 1, from verse 1 to verse number 19 says that the lineage is according to the father's house.
So basically what you're saying is, you read the context and the arguments fall apart.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, in John chapter 1, verse number 19 to 25, in the New Testament, we realize that they're still waiting for this prophet like Moses. John the Baptist is asked 3 questions. Is he Elijah? Is he the Messiah? Or is he the prophet? Notice it doesn't say a prophet, it says the prophet, a specific prophet. Christians claim, as Jesus said in the Gospel of Matthew, that John the Baptist is the spirit of Elijah. We know Jesus is the Christ. So who is the prophet? It's clear from here that the Messiah and the prophet are 2 separate figures. Also in John chapter 7, verse number 40 to 52, people are debating, Jews are debating over who Jesus is. Some said this man is the prophet, others said he is the Messiah. Thus the people were divided because of Jesus. So they weren't arguing whether Jesus is God or not, they were arguing whether he's the prophet like Moses or whether he is the Messiah. Thus establishing once again that they recognize these as 2 separate figures.
So I would say that Muhammad is starkly different from Moses in various ways. Irrespective of any similarities, any contrived similarities that people allege between Muhammad and Moses.
Now, Reverend James L. Dow, at the Collins James Dictionary of the Bible under Moses, on page 402 to 403, after talking about Moses, this is what he says: the only man in history who can be compared to him is Muhammad. This is a Christian, a reverend.
Context is the enemy of heresy. It's the enemy of false teachings. Context. It's like real estate. Location in the scriptures. What is it saying in its context? You read the context and you'll find out that it does not teach that Muhammad is prophesied in Deuteronomy 18.
Let me give you an example of the methodology used by Christians to find the prophecy of Jesus. In Matthew chapter 2, verse number 14, it reads in the following way: So he got up, took the child and his mother during the night and left for Egypt, where he stayed until the death of Herod. And so was fulfilled what the Lord had said through the prophet, "Out of Egypt I call my son." So according to the Gospel of Matthew, there's a prophecy in the Old Testament that Jesus fulfilled, which says, "Out of Egypt I have called my son." But when one goes back to the book of Hosea, where the statement is found, one will see that Matthew quoted half the sentence, and when read in full, it reads in the following way: "When Israel was a child, I loved him, and out of Egypt I called my son." So we see that rather than being a prophecy of Jesus, this verse was in fact speaking about a past event, the Jewish exodus from Egypt at the time of Moses. Now Christians have 2 choices: either admit that Matthew ripped the Old Testament out of context, or say that scripture can have apparent meanings but also be foreshadowing future events. If the Christian chooses the latter option, then he must be consistent when analyzing the case of Muhammad fulfilling prophecies.
If it's true, it has to be consistent. But I put a text without a context is a pretext for a proof text.
Exactly.
Right?
They wrote their own Torah. In Luke chapter 24, verse 46, it says, speaking to his disciples on the night of his alleged resurrection, he said, Thus it is written, and thus it was necessary for the Christ to suffer and to rise from the dead the third day. I would love Samuel Green to show me where this prophecy is in the Old Testament. John chapter 7, verse number 38, Jesus said, "He who believes in me, as the scripture has said, out of his heart will flow rivers of living water." I would like Samuel Green to show me where his scriptures have said this.
If it's true, it has to be consistent.